The human body is meant to remain intact, skin unbroken, muscles firmly attached to bone. But what if it wasn't? What if something lurked beneath the surface? Something unnatural? In a quiet town hidden deep within the Appalachian Mountains, an ancient curse was about to awaken, one that would strip flesh from bone and replace it with something far worse. Dr. Samuel Reed never believed in curses. As a man of science, he had spent his life dedicated to the tangible, the provable. But when he received a desperate letter from an old colleague in the remote town of Black Hollow, warning of an inexplicable disease consuming the townsfolk, he couldn't resist the call of curiosity. Armed with his medical bag and an insatiable need for answers, he embarked on a journey that would test not only his understanding of medicine, but his very grasp on reality. What he would find in Black Hollow would defy explanation. The human body, once a vessel of life and function, had become something else, something alive in ways it shouldn't be. The air in Black Hollow was thick with secrets, and beneath the surface, something waited, something ancient, something hungry. Black Hollow was a place forgotten by time. With a dwindling population and stories of old superstitions, it thrived in eerie silence. The road leading into town was narrow, winding through dense forests that seemed to swallow all light. As Dr. Reed drove his aging sedan through the mist-laden path, an unsettling feeling crept into his bones. The trees, gnarled and ancient, loomed over him like silent sentinels. Upon arrival, Reed was struck by how lifeless the town seemed. The wooden buildings stood weathered and crooked, their paint peeling like dead skin. Few people walked the streets, their faces drawn and wary. The town square, which should have been the heart of life, was abandoned except for a few market stalls selling dried herbs and trinkets carved from bone. Dr. Reed's first stop was the clinic, a small, dimly lit building on the edge of town. He was greeted by Dr. Eli Carter, a gaunt man with sunken eyes and trembling hands. "You came," Eli muttered, relief evident in his voice. "I don't know how much longer we have." "What exactly is happening here?" Reed asked, setting down his bag. Eli hesitated before responding. "You need to see for yourself." A local hunter, Caleb Marsh, arrived at Dr. Reed's makeshift clinic, claiming that his skin was moving. At first, Reed dismissed it as delirium. But when he removed the bandages, he saw something grotesque. Caleb's flesh was shifting, crawling across his body as if it had a mind of its own. Caleb winced as Reed peeled back the layers of stained gauze. Underneath, his skin was wrong. It undulated like tiny worms writhing just beneath the surface. Patches of his flesh had darkened to a sickly purple, while others looked raw and new, as if they had been recently regrown. Reed recoiled, bile rising in his throat. He had seen infections, necrosis, and autoimmune diseases, but this was something else entirely. "I can feel it moving," Caleb groaned, his fingers twitching against the table's edge. "It doesn't stop." Dr. Carter stood in the corner, avoiding the sight. "We've seen 6 cases like this already. Caleb is the only one still human enough to talk about it." "What happened to the others?" Reed asked, voice tight. Eli looked away. "They changed." Old woman Agnes, the town's self-proclaimed historian, spoke of a curse dating back centuries. A spirit vengeful and cruel had cursed the town's ancestors for disturbing its sacred grounds. The punishment? A fate worse than death, flesh that refused to remain still. Reed found Agnes in her crumbling house at the edge of the forest. She was ancient, her fingers gnarled like tree roots, her cataract-clouded eyes staring through him as she spoke. "They dug where they shouldn't have," she whispered. "The old ones warned them, but greed speaks louder than wisdom." Reed listened as she recounted the tale. How the original settlers of Black Hollow had disturbed an ancient burial site. How they had taken bones from the earth and built upon sacred ground. In return, the spirits had cursed them, ensuring that their descendants would never know peace in their own skin. "You can't stop it," Agnes warned. "You can only feed it." Caleb was just the beginning. Soon, others in Black Hollow showed signs of the same horror, skin bubbling, shifting, forming grotesque patterns. Panic swept the town. Some tried to flee, but the curse would not let them leave. It was as if the town itself had become a trap. One by one, people succumbed. A woman's hand detached and reformed on her shoulder. A man's torso split open like an overripe fruit, only to seal itself again in a different shape. The transformations were slow at first, subtle, but soon the afflicted were unrecognizable. Reed's hands shook as he examined the latest patient, a boy no older than 10. His skin was splitting along unnatural lines, his mouth stretching in silent screams. "Help me," the boy whispered before his face began to change. Dr. Reed uncovered old texts hidden beneath the town chapel, detailing a ritual that could stop the curse. However, the ritual demanded a terrible price, one that had been paid in blood centuries ago. The last attempt had failed, leading to the town's current plight. The pages were stained, the ink smudged by time and tears. A sacrifice was needed, a willing vessel to contain the curse. Without it, the affliction would continue, consuming all who remained. Reed felt his breath hitch as he realized what the ritual required. Someone had to take on the suffering, become the guardian of the curse, and there were no volunteers. Years later, Black Hollow was nothing more than ruins. The few who dared to visit swore they heard whispers in the wind, voices begging for release. But beneath the abandoned soil, something still crawled, waiting, watching, hungry for the next unfortunate soul to stumble into its grasp. And in the heart of it all, a single figure stood, motionless yet alive, his flesh forever shifting beneath the surface. Dr. Reed, the vessel of the curse, doomed to suffer for eternity. The crawling flesh had found its host, but it would never be satisfied.